programs going on right now happening up at the church, but those programs are only possible through you guys and through giving. God likes a cheerful giver, and there's two ways to give actually. One is ICC. You can text ICC give to 77977, or you can go online at islandschristian.org/giving.
Yes, and no matter if it's your first time watching us today or you're a regular attender of services, if you need any help at all, we have teams set up to help you in your time of need. So you can reach out to care@islandschristian.org.
Hey, welcome. We're so glad you're joining us again for part 2 of our conversation with Robert. Robert, thank you so much for being with us again as well. Hey, we have titled these conversations, Getting Through What You're Going Through. And I want us to talk specifically about that right now. I want us to have some conversation together about, how do we get through this season without just messing up our lives or blowing up our finances or just, destroying our families? Like, what do we need to get through this season of coronavirus in our lives?
Yeah, I think that's such a great title, because we often want to know, how do we get through, and we're oftentimes wanting to be at the end, but our refinement happens as we're going through, and that's really the beautiful thing here. And I think sometimes we miss that. And so we need this time actually to prune ourselves, right? To actually be tested in the fire. And so one of the things that in my field and profession is we talk a lot about resilience and how does that happen, and why are some people more resilient than other people? And one of the things that's really cool about this is, to give a good picture of this is that, have you ever been in a situation that other folks have been in that was pretty traumatic? I mean, I'm sure you've been in one of those circumstances. And then you come through that and you look at the other people who went through that same experience, and they come out differently. And you're asking yourself, well, how come they went down that road? And how come they went down that road? And so resilience is something that is absolutely something that you build.
So what you're saying is sometimes people go through a traumatic experience, and on the other side of it, they're worse off, right? They're more unhealthy.
Absolutely.
And then other people come out on the other side, and they're actually stronger and better. And you're saying the key to that, whichever one you land on, is this idea of resilience.
Absolutely.
Okay, so now you got to. I just got a little Bible college education, so you got to walk me through this idea of resilience. Like, what is if that's such a critical thing, right? That's the difference between being healthy when this is over with and being unhealthy when we get through this trauma or this experience. You got to help me know, what is resilience? How do I get it? Like, walk me through that.
Right. So the cool thing is this. So Stephen, what we know when we face these traumas, because we all do, is that most people are familiar with post-traumatic stress disorder, right? The PTSD of the trauma. But there's also this thing called post-traumatic growth, right?
Okay.
The trauma happens, and you can actually grow from the trauma, or you could have the disorder from the trauma, right? And so the cool thing is that resilience requires a certain number of factors. I mean, it's complicated, right? There's lots of these factors that are part of how do you build this resilience. And so it's just kind of neat to see, what maybe are these factors, or how does this person particularly, have these things, and then they get to the other side with growth. So there are somebody else that doesn't.
So there are factors of resilience. Or things that we need to be resilient. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely.
So do you have these? Can you share these with us?
Yeah, sure. I'll share a few of them with you, because I think it's pretty neat. And so, again, when we're trying to be resilient, we have to figure out, how do we adapt successfully to the challenges of our life? I mean, COVID-19 has provided us some pretty wild ways to live. And at the end of the day, whenever that day comes, we'll have to figure out how do we actually adapt to those things.
Right. There's a new normal coming. For
Absolutely.
everybody watching this, there's a new normal coming, whatever.
We don't know what it
Yeah.
will be, but
So yeah, there's a new normal coming. Like, so whatever that might look like or whatever that might feel, we're gonna eventually come to another side.
absolutely.
Okay. So tell us about
Sure.
these factors.
I mean, some of these factors are societal factors. Where are you living? What side of the tracks do you live on, right? Then you have the neurobiological side. This is how our brains are wired. Some of us are born with certain things. Some of us are not born with those things.
Okay.
Right? Then there's the individual. So, what you yourself have kind of brought to the picture or brought to the table is what I usually say. So who are you? What experiences do you have? Did you bring something to the table? That is a factor when we're talking about resilience specifically. And then culturally, this is a huge factor, right? Depending on where you live and how you are brought up or what your community looks like, the culture that you come from is huge when it comes to a factor in resilience. And then there's the community in and of itself. So even on a smaller scale, when you talk about your small groups, right? Those particular groups are a type of community, that actually helps build resilience. And we know the Lord says we have to do life in community. And then the last one really is about your family and the relationships that you have and the history of those things. So when you think about these resilience factors, we know that they exist. These things are absolutely in the Bible, right? Every one of these particular factors are around us all the time. And the cool thing, I think, is sometimes when we look at history, there's people who have lived through depression, world wars, slavery, right? The Renaissance period. And so each one of these periods in time where something as like a pandemic has occurred, people grow from that. And we really want to, understand, why do they grow? How do they grow? What are these factors that people have? How are they able to actually get out on the other side? How do you get through? But you have to go through it in order to get to the growth.
Yeah, so there's no bypassing it.
Oh, no.
You're gonna have to go through it. And then when you take these factors, the one that hit me was the family and the relationships you have, right?
Yeah.
I think about like my family, my parents and my siblings. We have a private Facebook group that we're all part of, and we all communicate there. And when I've gone through some difficult seasons with my family, that has been such a source of like just help for me and comfort for me, because they were at the moment not going through some bad stuff.
Right.
You know what I mean? And that seems to be a key, right? That you're going through some traumatic stuff, and then maybe there's somebody else who's a little stronger and they're kind of involved in your life. And so these factors you listed out, are they all like, how do we get them? Like, do we just possess them? Like, how does it play out practically?
Right. So, these factors are things that just exist, right? So everyone has them. So you have them, I have them.
Like, I have a cultural background. I have some brain chemistry going on.
Everybody has them, right? So we all know that this is kind of like the soil that you have.
Okay, good.
So once you have the soil, then it's about what type of seed are you putting in the soil.
That sounds a lot like a parable.
Absolutely, right.
So why don't you just tell us about that?
Right. So I always ask myself, I've learned all of these wonderful things. I've been to a ton of school. And so I always ask myself, where is this stuff in the Bible?
Right.
I wish I had gotten there while I was actually studying. That would have been a really neat and cool place to be. But even after that, and then going through trainings and trying to understand, like, okay, I get it. This particular researcher did this stuff. Awesome. This isn't new. It's impossible. We have so many sayings that people say, like, hey, count your blessings, have some sense of gratitude, positive psychology. Well, where is this stuff coming from? And it's really rooted in the Bible. And this is the cool thing when I get to answer that question for people when they say, well, are you a Christian counselor? And I'm like, everything about counseling comes from the Word.
That's right.
It all comes from the Word. We have to look at it from that space and place. And so, the parable of the sower is such a unique space, but it's also that place where I kind of go to when we're thinking about resilience.
Okay.
I mean, Christ is the person throwing out the seed, right? Essentially in the story. And so we're asking ourselves, well, what kind of soil is he throwing our seed in? And so, for you, you have that tight-knit family where you're able to kind of lean on them.
Okay.
But even in your family, you probably have some siblings that maybe didn't go down your pastor path. They may have gone down
Yeah, that's the truth.
right a whole different direction. And sometimes we sit back and say, well, how did that happen? Didn't they have the same soil? Mm-hmm. But see, each of these factors get, because part of these factors are like individual.
Okay.
How you actually see the world is unique and different in and of yourself. And so despite having the exact same experience happening to all of us right now, COVID-19 is happening not just, in Savannah. It's not just happening in Georgia. This is a worldwide issue. Mm-hmm. And it's so unique to see how different people around the world are actually handling this particular pandemic. And you start to actually understand where folks are super resilient because they have these factors, but they also have past experiences and understanding that this is something that I need to go through because I'm going to grow through it. And I don't want to just sit back and allow these things to just change who I am.
Okay, so you listed out these factors almost as if, like, you said, hey, this just everybody has them, they're just a reality. But the question that's ringing in my head is like, okay, Robert, that's great, but what can I do? Right? You know what I'm saying?
Right,
like, because like I want to get to, you're saying, hey, make sure you don't have post-traumatic stress disorder. You want to have post-traumatic stress growth.
Yes.
Okay. Now, tell me, what can I do?
So the best way to really start working through, I think, some of this stuff is to start understanding, like, so what are the things that I need to be resilient? And one of the things that you mentioned was, well, how do you actually, do you actually have coping strategies? Are you able to teach those to your children? Are you able to know what they are for yourself? Are you practicing those? And this
What's
is
an
like
example of a coping strategy?
Sure. So I believe like a great coping strategy is setting limits on electronics. I know, parents.
That's a hard time to be doing that right now, brother.
Hey. Limits. Because, right, if you don't set those limits, then you're going to have a kid that's up till 2 a.m.
Oh, yeah. And then nobody's watching what they're watching at 2 a.m.
Right. I mean, what's on at 2 a.m. other than infomercials, right?
Right. So coping mechanism. Well, they're not watching TV anyway. They got a phone.
YouTube.
So coping mechanisms are part of a good example of a coping mechanism. Coping mechanism for you is setting limits on things like electronics.
Absolutely.
Okay. Anything else that are good?
So another really good coping mechanism, I think, is that quiet time. So most of us, I think some people even in this area don't truly understand what it's like in the rest of our country even. If you're not from a city where you actually live in apartments,
Right.
Or condominiums, where that's just the normal style of living. I mean, most of the folks in this area, we have single family homes. We don't really have a whole lot of multi-dwellings, right? So, how do you actually work in that confined space with a family? I mean, there are people who 3, 4, 5 kids in a 2 or 3 bedroom apartment.
Yeah.
Across our country in major cities, in New York City, specifically, what I'm thinking of.
Yeah, we have a staff member in our church that is literally in an apartment complex on the 3rd floor, got 3 kids, and
Right.
So
So what do you do, right? So you need to carve special time, literally in your space, so that way you can have some alone time, some together time with maybe 1 or 2 of your children, depending on how many you have. And then really working that into a nice routine and schedule. I think staying on a routine and staying on a schedule will help you. Even
so that
in
could be
this
another
moment.
coping mechanism,
Absolutely.
right? Having a clear schedule of what you're doing and plan your days out.
Right.
Talk about it with your family. It sounds like the word that rings in my head is the word intentional.
Absolutely.
Where you can't in other words, you're not going to grow through this if you just go through this.
No, you have to grow through this.
Right.
And the only way to do that is to be intentional, like you mentioned, about how you do it.
Making choices. Okay, so maybe we can get some other ideas and resources from you, or articles, or something we can share with the people in our church, because I think thinking creatively about coping mechanisms and thinking of ways to create, it sounds like the word habits too, right? Positive habits, good habits to get you through this. Let me ask you this here. If a person will take what you're saying, create some coping mechanisms in their life, put some good habits, good behaviors through this season, does it make it easier to go through it?
I wouldn't say it makes it easier, but it definitely makes it more rewarding. You see, I believe that we all will struggle. I mean, the word says that one thing that is guaranteed is that.
Right.
And I think sometimes we are afraid to actually deal with a stressor or a trauma that may come in our lives. But the reality that I share with people all the time is that you actually need to face these fears in order for you to not have any fear about them. So the further away you stay, then the more fear will grow. And so I really think in order for you to grow through this, you have to just go and face the fear. And so what is that for most people? Some people will be, when this is lifted, is when will I actually be around other people? I mean, this is suiting for so many introverts, right? They're like loving it. That's what you guys are like. Yes, keep this going. I 6 feet. This is normal, and so they're going to be the
Introverts
ones,
are living their best life now, right?
Living their best life, and so they're going to hopefully help us, teach us how to do this new normal.
Right.
So maybe I won't give you 6 feet, but I'll give you 3. So there's going to be some of that, and I think that's really important for people to start to understand, is that it's not going to be easy. No one wants to face a crisis, but when you do, to understand and start asking yourself those questions of, what do I currently have within me that's going to help me grow from this particular circumstance?
Right.
And we all have things that will do that.
Part of it sounds like it's just a decision to not let this thing happen to you, but instead to be walking through it on purpose.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think as Christians, we sometimes lack what I call a theology of suffering, and we weren't ever given that.
Yeah.
And so because we kind of fall into this belief, and maybe you've fallen into this belief as well, that if I'm a good person and I believe in God, only good things will happen to me. And then
Never.
right? But some of that is preached and taught,
yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
But if you look at the scripture and you look at, I was just reading some scripture last night where Paul says, that we've been chosen to suffer for Christ, right?
Yeah.
That's a calling on our lives, and so I think this lack of a theology of suffering causes some of us to go into an immediate, a passive kind of like, oh no, this is happening to me,
Right.
instead of a intentional, what is God doing right now? How is He working in my life right now? And what are the things I need to be doing so that on the other side of it, I am healthier,
Yeah.
I am whole, and I'm closer to Jesus.
Right.
And
I almost feel like a sermon is getting ready to happen, only because one of the great things that a mentor of mine shared, actually at my church that I came from in Maryland, is if you are not experiencing some turmoil in your life, that simply means that maybe the devil has you on his team. And that's deep for me. Like, so do I always want to be in a constant state of suffering? No, but I also know that if I am working for the Lord, that it's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to look different. It may even feel very different. And so I think many of us have to understand that it's okay to be comfortable being uncomfortable, but especially when you're working for the Lord and you're doing His will. Because the world in and of itself is sheltering in place.
yeah,
But see, we need to actually go and do.
yeah.
because this is what the world is calling for us to do. This is our time. This is our moment. And that's how we look at it. And if we look at it that way, then absolutely we'll have growth at the end of this.
So you're saying there's a call on our lives in the midst of this trauma that is not only for our growth, but for the good of the world.
Absolutely.
I love it. Hey, thank you for joining us. I hope that this has helped you. I hope that you have enjoyed these 2 parts that we've had with Robert as we have been discussing how do we get through, how do we get through, or I should say, how do we grow through
Yes.
what we're going through. We love you guys. We can't wait to see you this week for our other online gatherings for your children, for your students, and Thursday night for communion and worship. You guys have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much for joining us today. We hope you have a great day and a blessed week, and we can't wait to worship with you again soon.
Hasta la vista, baby.